What's going on, Buffs Nation? Wanted to get a second video out before I head downtown for the Nuggets watch party. Go Nuggets. But a lot of this talk regarding the Nebraska CU rivalry has had a lot on my mind that I've wanted to get off my chest. I want to talk a little bit more about Matt Rhule, Coach Prime, and why I feel like both sides, we need to play this up more. Now, it's no shock if you're watching this channel, you probably know that CU hasn't won a bowl game since 2004. As I've said constantly, CU has not won a bowl game since YouTube existed. This program has been down in the dumps for 20 years. And honestly, if we're looking at the other side with Nebraska football, they haven't been much better. They haven't had a winning season since 2016. If you don't count CU's COVID year when we went to the Alamo Bowl in that shortened season, CU hasn't had a winning record since that year either. Nebraska's last bowl game win was 2015, and they've gone through a handful of coaches just like we have. And as we all know, Coach Prime is here in Boulder, and this is the first time that CU has been in the national discussion when it comes to football in 20 plus years. Nebraska, on the flip side, is fighting for that same relevancy. They're looking, although they have recruited very well, even recently in the past, they have not had those results to put them in the conversation nationally. Now, probably the closest time in the past that we've had this much excitement going into a season in which Colorado and Nebraska were playing each other was probably in 2019. CU had just hired Mel Tucker. Nebraska had hired Scott Frost. And that game performed very well. I think it was on Fox, and it drew about 3.75 million viewers that Saturday. And I think we can expect for that number to be even much higher for this year's Nebraska game against CU, given that it's going to be that rivalry, that matchup, Coach Prime's first home game here, coaching here in Boulder. And if CU's able to pull off an upset against the betting odds and upset TCU, there's going to be a lot of hype going into this game where you might see them put up NFL type viewing numbers. All this to say, I think both Coach Prime and Matt Rhule and the Nebraska and CU athletic departments have to realize that this rivalry is mutually beneficial to both programs. What's upsetting is that after this home and home in 23 and 24, the Buffs and Cornhuskers aren't scheduled to play each other at all in the future. Right now, a lot of the opponents have been filled out for the rest of the 2020 decade and into the 2030s, but they're not slated for another home and home. And I think that college football and Matt Rhule and Coach Prime are all better off if we have this rivalry every year. Again, you see it just a couple months ago with Ohio State deciding that they weren't going to play Washington for different reasons, but they were able to buy out that agreement and put in another opponent that they wanted. And I think CU and Nebraska need to do the same thing. If we're not going to play in the same conference, we need to acknowledge that this is a game that still needs to be played every year. The numbers are going to speak for themselves. And when you're talking about needing storylines, I mean, you couldn't ask for better storylines. You already have Matt Rhule, who's making these kind of side comments in press conferences towards Coach Prime and the way that he's doing things. It's clear that he's in his head because they're doing it in completely different ways. You look at how Matt Rhule has operated throughout his career. He's somebody that has taken over these smaller football programs that have been in tough situations, and he's rebuilt them. He's been in markets that have not been great or scenic places to live. I don't really think there's much of a difference between Lincoln, Nebraska and Waco, Texas, if I'm being honest. On the flip side, you have PRIMETIME, which that explains everything. He's in the limelight constantly. He's in the storylines by the journalists and the media every week. He has his own media teams pushing out content daily. He's making statements daily. There's a different draw that he has. And then if you look at Boulder, Colorado, contrasting it with Lincoln, Nebraska, you really can't get two different places coming together to play each other on the field. So what would I like to see? Again, I would like to see CU and Nebraska both prioritize this rivalry moving forward. And I've had some Nebraska fans come in here and say, well, CU's not our rival, yada, yada, yada. Well, if that wasn't true, then y'all wouldn't have packed out Folsom Field like y'all did in 2019. This is a rivalry in which both of us can really benefit from. And I think on the CU side, again, since joining the Pac-12, we haven't developed any of those big-time rivalries. I think a lot of that is because we haven't been good. There could have been a chance, I think, maybe with Utah. But again, we haven't been on that level to challenge Utah until, hopefully, this year. I would say the same thing's probably true with Nebraska in some senses since joining the Big Ten. It hasn't exactly gone as planned for them as well. And I think we can acknowledge that if we continue to play each other in these out-of-conference games, that's going to be beneficial financially to these programs, as well as exposure, notoriety, media attention, rivalry. What I would also like to see is a little bit more talk leading up to this game September 9th from Matt Rhule. He's made a lot of comments about Coach Prime kind of on the side or insinuating something. Just come out here and say it. On the flip side, Coach Prime, I know that when people get him riled up like he did at Jackson State, he will go and create a show. And I think that that's something that we can look forward to as Buffs fans as this game approaches. But I'm hoping that both of them will realize that this show isn't something that needs to die after 2024. This needs to be something prioritized for both programs if we're wanting to get back to national prominence. And I would hope that Nebraska feels the same way. And I would hope that they wouldn't be too scared to dodge Coach Prime and the Buffaloes into the future. So let me know what y'all think, and Sco Buffs.